There's a commotion in the camp. Saeed is hurt, and it turns out that the Canadian Ethan wasn't on the plane. Jack realized that Charlie and Claire were in danger. He and John rushed into the jungle to look for them. There they found signs of struggle and dragging. Apparently Charlie and Claire have been kidnapped. John insisted on getting the men together before starting the search, but Jack didn't want to waste time. As he ran, he remembered how the patient on the operating table had a cardiac arrest. Jack grabbed the defibrillator, but it was useless. But he did not want to give up and continued to massage the heart. This did not help either, and the father said that the relatives should be informed. John, Kate, and Boone were going to follow Jack to find Charlie and Claire. Mike wanted to go with them, too, but John said extra people would only get in the way. Jack didn't know where to run next, remembering telling his father in the operating room that he shouldn't have operated. Mr. Shepard advised him not to interfere and told him not to question his decision, for the girl would have died anyway. Jack thought it was the father's fault. His hands were shaking, so he hit an artery, which caused the heart to stop. Shepard Sr. doesn't want to hear admonitions from his son and reminders of his drinking problems. John and his group catch up with Jack. Locke is surprised that he had previously hunted with Ethan and suspected nothing. At camp, Mike resents the fact that everyone thinks John is in charge just because he can hunt. Walt doesn't like his father's words. In the boys' opinion, they should all really listen to Mr. Locke. Mike disagrees and also intends with his group of people to search for the missing. Meanwhile, John is knitting red ribbons into the trees so he doesn't get lost. Boone volunteers to help him. Jack thinks they're too slow to act. Kate pulled him aside and asked him to stop arguing with Locke. Then Jack admitted that he felt guilty about not believing Claire, thinking that her stories about the attack were the result of stress. John and Boone found Charlie's thing. Apparently, Ethan left the trail intentionally. The company continues to make their way through the jungle. John noticed footprints. Jack thinks they should go the other way and suggests we split up. At this time Mike told Sawyer about Ethan and suggested that there were other people on the island. But Sawyer thought it was just a child's fantasy. As Sawyer was about to leave, the boy advised him to ask Saeed, who had recently returned. Boone asks John what his profession is, and he says he used to work for a packing company. Meanwhile, Kate asks Jack not to run at random, but to keep an eye on the tracks. Jack asks where she learned to navigate, and she says her father was in the military. They often hiked in the woods. Jack recalls how his father provided him with the autopsy report. The patient had originally been bleeding internally after the accident, but despite their efforts, she still passed away. Jack was not convinced and refused to sign the autopsy report. The father reminded him that if he mentioned alcohol, the consequences would be very serious, up to and including revoking his license. The father said they had to be like-minded. He was always harsh with his son, but because of that he grew up to be the most gifted surgeon in town. Since practicing medicine was the father's life's work, Jack did sign the report. Meanwhile, Sawyer came to the wounded Saeed, who had previously tortured him for nothing. It would have been the perfect chance for Sawyer to get revenge. But when he heard from Saeed about the French woman and the others, he was shocked. No one understood who the others were. Before he left, Sawyer said he kept up the Saeed signal fire. To pass the time, Walt and Hugo played. The boy casually mentioned the stepfather who had raised him. At this time Boone told that before the plane crash he had been helping his mother with the wedding business. John reported that it was about to start raining and Boone had better get back to camp, but the guy wasn't going to back down. At this point the downpour began. Jack found another one of Charlie's things. Suddenly there were screams. Jack rushed to the source of the noise, Kate following him. At some point Jack slipped off the high ground and fell. He saw Ethan next to him, who said that if they didn't stop chasing him, one of the hostages would die. A struggle ensues between them, but against the well-trained Ethan, Jack has no chance. Lying in the mud, he recalls how the dead patient's husband intended to sue. Shepard Sr. calmed him down, reassuring him that they had done all they could. Kate brought Jack to his senses, urging him to return to camp, for the tracks had been washed away by the rain. But Jack wasn't about to give up, remembering his father speaking at the doctor's conclave. Jack was shocked when he learned that the patient was early pregnant. He stated his intention to change the statement and reported that his father had operated while intoxicated and damaged the patient's hepatic artery. In the present, they continue to make their way through the jungle and find Charlie suspended. They freed him, but Charlie wasn't breathing. Jack began to give him heart massage and CPR, and Kate couldn't hold back her tears. She thought Charlie was beyond help, but Jack wouldn't stop. Surprisingly, Charlie came to life. Kate and Jack's happiness was boundless. By nightfall they were back at the camp. Charlie didn't say a word, very frightened. Jack said they were going to look for Claire at dawn, so any information would be helpful. Charlie only replied that he didn't remember anything. Shannon worries about his brother. Meanwhile, Boone and John notice what looks like a hatch in the ground. The next day Kate climbed a tree to pick fruit. As she descended, she heard a rustling noise and threw a rock, hitting Sawyer. He assured that he was just worried about her. Kate said she was capable of standing up for herself. Suddenly they came to a lake with a waterfall. Sawyer intended to go for a swim. Kate supported his initiative, for they could use a little relaxation. Under the water, however, they saw bodies. Sawyer wanted to dive in again and search the bodies for anything of value. Kate decided to go with him and noticed the case. When they got it out, they couldn't open it because they needed a key. Sawyer found it suspicious that Kate had agreed to give him the case so easily. A great tide came in, and people began to salvage the things lying on the beach. Jack told Saeed that everyone would have to move to the caves. Jack also asked to take him to see Rousseau. Saeed claimed she's crazy. He only managed to steal from her maps of the island and papers with some equations that don't make sense. Charlie is still not talking, and Shannon asks her brother why he and Locke have been disappearing into the woods for the past 4 days. After all traces have been washed away. Shannon was very offended by Boone's words that she was useless. By the light of the flame, Kate recalls taking out a loan from the bank, saying she was supposedly working as a photographer. Suddenly, masked men with guns burst in. The gang leader demanded that the bank manager open the safe. When Sawyer fell asleep, Kate tried to steal the case, but he caught her. Despite her best efforts, Kate was forced to walk away with nothing. In the afternoon, while Shannon was sunbathing, Saeed approached her with a request. He needed to translate the documents he had stolen from Rousseau. They contain equations with comments in French. Shannon was reluctant to help at first, since she doesn't speak the language well, but then she agreed. Meanwhile, Sawyer was trying to open the case. Mike and Hugo mocked him, for such cases are almost impossible to open without a key. Boone and John continued to try to get into the hatch in secret. Rose approached Charlie and advised him to get to work. After all, Charlie wasn't the only one here who had something to be sad about. Sawyer still cherished the hope of opening the case. As he threw it off the cliff, Kate stole it. Sawyer rushed after it and finally caught her. Sawyer proposed a deal. She would tell him what was inside, and he would give her the case. Kate refused to speak, remembering how the bandit tried to force the bank manager to give up the key. Suddenly one of the men jumped on the intruder, and the gun fell out of his hands. Kate picked up the gun, but did not fire it. Eventually the bandit took it from her and took her to an adjoining room. It turned out that Kate was an accomplice to the robbery. But they are not only companions, they are also lovers. In the meantime, Shannon tries to translate the notes into English. A nice conversation ensues between her and Saeed. Kate came to Jack, saying she had a problem. She confessed that the bailiff accompanying her had a case on the plane that had been checked into luggage compartment. Inside are 4 pistols and ammunition. The bailiff had the key in his wallet, which he kept in his pocket. Since he was buried a long time ago, they will have to dig up the grave. Jack has volunteered to help conduct the exhumation, but they will open the case together. Rose tells Charlie that no one blames him for what happened to Claire. He did the best he could. Before digging up the grave, Claire recalls how the companion punched her in the face for persuasion. He allegedly took her hostage, and then the bank manager agreed to give him the key to the safe. Jack and Kate kept digging, despite the horrible smell. Kate tried to stealthily hide the key, but Jack cracked her up and took it away. In the meantime, Shannon was able to translate some texts, but the translation was absurd. When Saeed said he had asked for her help for nothing at all, Shannon got upset and left. Jack demanded that Sawyer give him the case or else he would stop giving him antibiotics to cure his arm. Sawyer warned Jack that Kate was a liar. Kate recalls how her accomplices stole the money. The bank manager begged them to let the girl go, but the bandit suddenly said she was in on it and took off his mask. Kate, whom he called Maggie, was alarmed by this. She drew her gun and opened fire on the accomplices. It turned out that she was just using them to get to the 815 cell. In the present, Jack opened the case, finding money, ammunition, guns, and an envelope with a small toy airplane inside. Jack demanded an explanation. Kate said it was the thing of the man she loved and cried. Jack had nothing to say and left. The people from the beach were about to move into the caves. Later, at the campfire, Rose told Charlie that her husband, who had been in the tail section of the plane, was in fact alive. Charlie couldn't take it anymore and cried. Rose said a prayer. Shannon walked over to Saeed. She remembered where those strange lines came from. They turned out to be from an old Japanese cartoon that had been dubbed into French. Sitting by the fire, Kate was holding a toy airplane. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel.